What if fear wasn't a natural instinct, but a carefully woven illusion? What if everything you ever believed about fear being useful was a lie passed down through repetition, dressed in caution, and accepted without question? You weren't born with fear. You were trained to kneel before it. And today that training ends. Fear is not thunder. It does not shake the walls. It doesn't wear a uniform or demand entry. Fear is a shadow. It moves slowly, quietly, and gains power only when you give it space to grow. It is not a warning system. It is a habit. And like any habit, it can be broken, rewired, replaced. You've lived long enough waiting to feel ready. You've delayed too many dreams because fear whispered, "Not yet." But let me speak clearly. Hesitation is not wisdom. It is the disguise fear wears to look intelligent. Fear thrives in delay. It multiplies in silence. The longer you wait, the louder it becomes. And yet the moment you truly move, it shrinks. Not because it disappears, but because you stop feeding it with obedience. You've heard fear's voice so often you've mistaken it for your own. But it is not. It is the residue of other people's doubts, replaying in your subconscious, acting as truth. Every time you said, "I can't," it was fear speaking. Every time you chose safety over growth, fear made the decision. And now you must take that power back. You do not manage fear. You remove it. Not by avoiding it, not by negotiating with it, but by recognizing it as an intruder in your mind, an uninvited guest, a parasite, one that only survives if you feed it attention, belief, and silence. Ask yourself, what has fear cost you? What version of yourself did you bury because fear said it wasn't the right time? How many opportunities passed you by while you rehearsed worst-case scenarios? The truth is simple. Fear builds nothing. It only protects what already exists. But you are not here to maintain what is. You are here to build what could be. And builders do not ask permission from fear. You don't need to feel fearless to act. You act and then fear loses its grip. You speak and fear begins to starve. You move and fear dies in motion. This is the truth that the great men of history lived by. They didn't wait for the absence of fear. They made decisions in its presence. They took steps while their hearts pounded. They spoke boldly while doubt screamed. And every time they did, fear became weaker. Henry Ford was told he lacked the education. Edison was laughed at for failing thousands of times. Carnegie began with nothing, and yet none of them waited. They built in silence. They moved without applause, and fear had no seat at their table. You want to eliminate fear? Then stop entertaining it. Stop hosting it in your thoughts. Stop giving it names like logic, reason, caution. Call it what it is, a thief of your time, your purpose, your identity. Say it aloud. I will no longer live according to fear's suggestions. I will no longer wait to feel ready. I will no longer ask for permission from a voice that has never built anything. Your life begins the moment fear no longer makes your decisions, and that moment is now. Move before the fear speaks. Speak before the fear explains. Decide before the fear convinces you to wait. Because freedom is not found in comfort. It's found in courage. And courage is not the absence of fear, it's action in spite of it. This is not theory. This is the law of mind. Repetition creates rhythm. Rhythm becomes identity. If fear is repeated, it becomes your rhythm. But if you repeat power, you rewrite your nature. Today, begin the rewrite. Say what you mean. Move when you're called. Execute without delay. Because the man who removes fear is the man who moves while it still tries to whisper. And once you start, it can't follow. Fear doesn't need to shout to control you. It only needs to whisper at the right time. A moment before you apply, a second before you speak, a breath before you leap. That's when it strikes with quiet logic, dressed as care. What if you fail? What will they think? Are you sure? These are not questions, they are chains. Chains that bind your future to your past, chains that keep your potential hostage to your history. But chains, no matter how old, can be broken. Understand this, Fear is not in the event, it is in your anticipation. Fear lives in futures that haven't happened. It makes you suffer twice, once in imagination and again in avoidance. But if you want to eliminate fear, you must change your relationship with the unknown. Not fear it, not tolerate it, embrace it, because the unknown is not danger. It is possibility. It is growth. It is every breakthrough waiting to be discovered. You weren't designed to live small. You were built for expansion. And expansion begins where comfort ends. You must become violent with your hesitation, ruthless with your doubt. You must develop the habit of boldness, not just as an act, but as an identity, as your nature, as your standard. Because the life you want does not exist in hesitation. It lives in speed, in immediacy, in the willingness to walk straight into uncertainty and claim what's yours before fear sets its roots. People spend their lives asking how to be more confident, how to be fearless. But the answer is not in books or affirmations. The answer is in movement, in momentum, in the decision to act before fear finishes its sentence. You must become so consistent in movement that fear runs out of time. It can't prepare its attack if you're already gone. And once you experience this freedom, once you taste life outside the grip of fear, you'll never go back. You'll look at the person you were, the delays, the overthinking, the playing small, and you'll wonder how you ever thought that was living. So, stop waiting for the world to grant you courage. It won't. The world responds to those who act, to those who lead, to those who decide. And now, you decide. Not tomorrow, not next week, right now. Burn the script fear wrote for your life. Tear up the timelines you were told to follow. Step out of the crowd, speak with fire, move with finality. Act with the kind of certainty that leaves fear no space to breathe. This is how fear is removed. Not managed, not reduced, removed. Entirely. The greatest illusion fear ever created was convincing you it was a protector, that it kept you from harm, that it had your best interest in mind. But the truth is, fear never protected you. It only prevented you from speaking up, from starting, from loving, from risking, from becoming. It disguised itself as wisdom, as caution, as maturity, but it was always the thief, the silent saboteur of destiny. Look back. Every moment you regret is tied to fear, not failure, not loss, fear. The moment you didn't act, the love you didn't pursue, the business you didn't build, the truth you didn't speak, these aren't mistakes. They're graves where pieces of you were buried alive. And yet fear is not a monster. It's a habit of hesitation, a reflex of resistance. And like any habit, it can be broken, replaced, rewired, but only through direct confrontation. You cannot negotiate with fear. You must interrupt it, overwhelm it, flood it with evidence that it has no place in your new life. Every time you move forward, despite fear, you reprogram your brain. You rewire your story. You send a message to your subconscious, I am not who I used to be. This message must be repeated through action, not affirmation, through proof, not promises. You don't overcome fear with theory. You overcome it with movement, with decisions, with motion so massive that fear can't keep up. And here's the key. It's not about being fearless, it's about being fear-trained. Knowing that fear will appear, but building yourself so strong, so focused, so fast that it never gets the steering wheel. That's what the great ones do. They don't wait for courage. They don't hope for bravery. They build systems, habits, rituals. They reduce the space between thought and action until fear has nowhere to live. They don't seek comfort, they seek friction. They build environments that expose weakness because they know pressure is the birthplace of power. You must become the architect of your edge. Construct a life where the easy path is eliminated, where your standards are higher than your fears. And when fear knocks, you won't answer, because you'll be too busy building, too deep in motion, too far ahead to hear it anymore. You must train for discomfort like a warrior trains for war, not with hope, not with passive optimism, but with deliberate, structured exposure, voluntary pressure. You lean into that which makes others flinch. That's how you become unshakable. That's how you remove fear, not by escaping the battlefield, but by walking straight into it again and again until fear forgets your name. Every time you hesitate, fear grows stronger. Every time you act, it retreats. It's not magic, it's math. Action subtracts fear. Inaction multiplies it. So ask yourself, are you feeding your fear or starving it? This is the root of transformation. To remove fear is to remove the luxury of indecision. You burn the boats. You erase the exit signs. You give yourself no way back to the small version of you that tolerated fear as a roommate. You stop negotiating with hesitation. You start treating your goals like obligations. You create pressure, intentionally deadlines, accountability, stakes, because without pressure, the default is always safety, and safety is the soil where fear thrives. Break the rhythm. Disrupt the internal dialogue. Because fear doesn't grow in silence, it grows in stagnation. When you sit still, when you loop the same thoughts, fear builds a home. But when you move, when you speak, when you execute, it has no walls to cling to. The people you admire didn't delete fear from their minds. They just deleted the option of submission. They overtrained their courage until fear became background noise. Not gone, just irrelevant. That's the new standard. Not perfection, not fearlessness, but irrelevance. Fear will knock. Let it. But don't pause. Don't open. Keep moving. Keep building. Keep breathing into discomfort until you're so used to the fire, you don't even notice the flames anymore. This is your responsibility, not your motivation, not your inspiration, your duty. Because the world doesn't just need fearless people, it needs people who fear less, act more, and live louder than the voices trying to keep them small. Fear survives in environments of control. The more you try to script every outcome, the more fragile you become. The antidote is exposure. You walk into the unknown without guarantees. That's the test. That's the path. You release the addiction to certainty and replace it with commitment. Because once you're committed, nothing else matters. Not doubt, not opinions, not outcomes. Fear loses its grip when you decide that forward is the only direction. And don't confuse preparation with postponement. Don't hide behind learning. At some point, another course won't help. Another book won't save you. Only action will. Messy, imperfect, unready action. That's the only tool, sharp enough to cut fear at the root. You weren't built to tiptoe through life avoiding risk. You were built to push, to grow, to transform, to scrape your knees, to fail loudly, and rise even louder. There is no glory in avoiding fear. The glory is in facing it, dragging it into the light, and showing it that you refuse to live as its shadow. So break something, shake something, disrupt the loop you've been trapped in, because nothing will change until you do. And that change won't begin with permission. It begins with a line in the sand, drawn by you, that says, from this moment forward, I will not fear the fire, I will become it. You become the storm, the force, the movement, and fear becomes the thing that fears you. This is not motivation. This is instruction. Take the step, speak the truth, launch the idea, make the call, say the words, walk into the room, do it before you're ready. Because readiness is not a feeling, it's a result. And you earn it by going first. No one is coming to hand you bravery. It is self-issued, self-earned, and you must declare it daily with the only language fear understands, bold, unrelenting action. You can't remove fear by understanding it. You remove it by overriding it, by choosing a different pattern when the familiar one screams to return. That's the war you're in, not a war of information, but of decision. The brain will offer the same exits, the same excuses, the same delays, and you will feel them as truth, but they are not. They are just habits wearing the costume of logic. Don't negotiate with them. Replace them. Because fear is a skilled liar. It whispers in the language of safety, logic, and realism. But underneath its mask is the thief of every dream you've postponed, every goal you've buried, every talent you've left unused. You don't beat fear by arguing with it. You beat it by outlasting it. You show up again. You press forward again. You execute when it tells you to wait, and slowly it loses its influence. Not because it vanished, but because you stopped responding. This is the hidden code, the quiet revolution. Every day you have a moment, tiny, invisible, easily missed, where you either answer the voice of fear or you don't. And in that decision, you build a self. One brick, one act, one rejection of fear at a time. You build a self so fortified, so practiced, so relentless that even when fear visits, it finds no place to rest. Let's continue. Y expandirate pasar de 6,000 caracteres. If you want freedom, you must become a destroyer of limits, not just external ones, but the inner ceilings that fear built while you weren't watching. They show up as hesitation, as maybe later, as I'm not ready yet. Burn them. Those aren't thoughts, they're chains. Everything fear told you was too risky? Do it. Everything it said you weren't good enough for? Train for it. Everything it warned would lead to embarrassment? Walk straight into it. Your enemy isn't fear. Your enemy is obedience to it. Courage isn't loud, it isn't flashy. Sometimes it's the quiet decision to wake up one more time and act against your programming, to send the email, to open the door, to tell the truth, to show your work, to stand alone. You can't heal in theory. You can't grow in comfort. The only way to disarm fear is to do the very thing it warned you against. And no, you don't need to feel brave, you just need to act. Because every time you act, you leave fear with fewer allies. You dismantle its structure from within. You pull the wires out of the illusion. And one day it's gonna not, because you waited it out, but because you tore it down. And what's left is a self you barely recognize. Not because you became someone new, but because you finally stopped hiding who you were always meant to be. Fear sells you a version of your life that's acceptable, predictable, and utterly forgettable. And you'll live it unless you revolt, unless you plant your feet in the fire and say, not anymore. You weren't built to blend in. You weren't made to chase comfort like a beggar hoping for crumbs. That instinct inside you, the one that wants to roar, to shake the walls, to make your mark, that's not a fantasy. That's the truth. Fear just buried it under layers of excuses. The longer you wait to face it, the deeper it roots itself in your habits. And then you start calling it personality. You start saying, that's just how I am. No, that's just how fear made you. Undo it. Stand when it tells you to kneel. Speak when it urges you to shut down. Move when it demands stillness. That resistance you feel, that tension before a bold step, that's not a warning, it's a signal. It means you're about to grow. It means the old version of you is being challenged by the one you're becoming. Welcome that friction. Embrace that discomfort. Let it refine you. Because once you realize fear is a compass, not a prison, your life opens up. Every path it warned you away from becomes a path you must now walk. And on the other side, strength, confidence, power. All earned, all yours. This is the work. Not glamorous, not always visible, but transformational. The moment you stop waiting to feel ready and act anyway, you take your first real step into the life fear tried to steal. It begins with one decision, not a massive leap, but a small refusal. You refuse to let fear dictate the next move, and then you stack that refusal day by day into a discipline, into an identity. Fear doesn't vanish because you gain new information. It weakens because you stopped feeding it attention. You stopped obeying its voice like it was law. It's not law, it's noise, and you can turn it off. Your dreams are not fragile, you are not fragile. The fear wants you to believe you must protect yourself from pain. But growth is forged in pressure. Wisdom is born from mistakes. Strength is earned through struggle. There is no version of your potential that lives in the comfort zone. Everything you're capable of becoming waits behind the doors fear told you never to open. Open them. What you'll find isn't just confidence, it's proof. Proof that you were always more powerful than you imagined, that you were never weak, only unaware of your own strength. And the more you lean into that strength, the more fearless you become, not because danger disappears, but because your response to it evolves. You are no longer a servant to reaction. You are a creator of reality. You don't wait for certainty. You move with conviction. That is how fear is removed, not ignored, not denied, but dismantled by relentless action in the direction of truth. Every time you step forward into discomfort, you reclaim a piece of yourself. You're not just building a life, you're rebuilding your inner architecture, reinforcing courage where there was hesitation, replacing paralysis with progress. Fear once served you. It protected you when you didn't know better. But now it's outdated. You've outgrown its grip. And the future won't wait. Every moment you hesitate, your destiny retreats one step. But when you move, it races to meet you. So move. Not tomorrow. Not when you feel like it. Now. Because the clock is ticking. Not the one on the wall, but the one inside you. And one day, it will run out. Don't let fear write your story. Tear the page, grab the pen, and write something worth remembering. There's a moment in every life when you realize fear isn't just an emotion, it's a decision, a lens, a story you've agreed to believe. But what happens when you stop believing it? You begin to see clearly. You start noticing all the opportunities fear told you were dangerous. You see the doors it told you were locked. They're open now, and they've always been. But stepping through them means letting go of the version of you that depended on fear, that wrapped itself in worry to feel safe, that hesitated, hoping for a guarantee. There are no guarantees, only growth or retreat. You choose. And when you choose growth, fear becomes your training ground. Every fear you face becomes fuel. Every challenge you accept becomes a ladder. Every failure becomes a forge. You don't need to destroy fear. You need to stop worshiping it. Stop giving it the final say. You're not here to bow, you're here to build. And to build something real, you must risk. Risk being misunderstood. Risk failing publicly. Risk losing the familiar to gain the extraordinary. That's the price, and it's worth it. Because the moment you embrace risk, you start living. You begin operating on truth, not fear. You make decisions from vision, not doubt. You speak louder. You move faster. You become the kind of person who doesn't ask for permission to grow. And when setbacks hit, and they will, you don't fold, you observe, you adjust, and you continue. Because growth isn't linear. It's earned in the tension between effort and uncertainty. Fear can't survive in a mind trained on discipline, a mind that refuses to back down from its calling, a mind that knows, whatever I fear, I must face. So you stare fear down, you name it, you walk toward it. And something strange happens. It weakens, not because it disappears, but because your courage gets louder. That courage, it's your compass now. It doesn't silence fear, it leads despite it. And soon fear stops looking like a wall. It looks like a signal, a signpost, telling you exactly where you need to go next. Run toward it. Most people run from discomfort. That's why they stay the same. You're not most people. You were built to break cycles, to break the mold, to rise above the noise of hesitation and act with precision when others stall. That's how legacy is built, not in the absence of fear, but in the presence of it defied. The person you're becoming is forged in this furnace, not in comfort, not in applause, but in the silence of your lonely decisions when no one sees and no one claps. That's where power is born. You don't owe fear anything. Not your time, not your energy, not your identity. You've paid that price for too long. Now, you invest in vision, in progress, in mastery. You craft a life that reflects who you could be, Camino, who fear told you to be. And in time, others will wonder how you became unshakable. But you'll know it wasn't luck. It was war. A war you won in the quiet every day by choosing forward instead of back. Every step forward was a revolt against your past self, against comfort, against the chains of indecision. You rewrote the script. Fear used to speak first, but now it barely whispers. It knows it has no place in the presence of resolve. Because now you act faster than your doubts. You commit before you overthink. You build while others debate. And that's your advantage. Speed, boldness, relentless forward motion. There is no fear strong enough to stop someone who refuses to stop. That's who you are now. Fear may follow, but it never leads. Let others play it safe. Let them wait for the perfect moment. You create the moment. You make it real by acting when others freeze. And through that, your life becomes a signal to others. A living example that fear can be defeated not by magic, but by decision. Every breakthrough began with someone who was just as scared as you, but they moved anyway. And that's all that matters. Not how you feel, but what you do in spite of it. And when you make that choice over and over, something shifts. You start expecting resistance. You start welcoming the hard path because you know it leads to uncommon results. You stop asking for life to be easy. You ask for strength, for clarity, for endurance, and you get it not all at once, but day by day as you prove yourself worthy of more. Fear thrives on hesitation, so you eliminate it. You move quickly, precisely, you trust your preparation, and execute. And when the results come, they're not a surprise, they're inevitable. Because this is who you are now, a person who acts, builds, and becomes unstoppable by design. No fear can match that kind of momentum. So don't wait, don't flinch, don't stall. Take the next step right now, and let the old you watch in awe as you become everything fear tried to prevent. There's a discipline to fearlessness, a repetition of choices that reshape your instincts. The old reflex was to run, to pause, to second guess, but now you lean in, you accelerate when the pressure builds. You understand, fear never disappears, it just learns to step aside for the determined. You've crossed the threshold. You no longer look back for validation. You don't wait for approval. You don't hope for certainty. You build it. You create clarity through action. Let them call you reckless. Let them say you're moving too fast. That's what they always say before they ask you how you did it. Because you didn't ask fear for permission, you asked your future self, "What do I owe you?" And the answer was, everything. So you gave it everything. And now, everything is changing. Keep going. Your new life is already waiting for you. All that's left is for you to catch up to it with courage, with clarity, and without fear. Remember, the person you fear becoming is already gone. You buried them every time you chose growth. Now you rise. Not someday now, because nothing changes until you do, and you just did. This is your new baseline. Courage is no longer optional, it's standard. So breathe deep, step forward, and leave fear behind for good. You want to live without fear? Then you must kill the version of yourself that worships comfort. Because fear doesn't grow in chaos, it grows in comfort, in routines that ask nothing of you, in safety that suffocates your potential. You think fear protects you, but it traps you, keeps you stuck, distracted, disconnected from your power. Fear whispers fake logic. It sounds like reason, but it's just resistance wearing a suit. And the longer you listen, the more you shrink. You compromise, you delay, you decay. But here's the truth most never realize. Fear can't survive full exposure. The moment you drag it into the light, name it, stare it down, it starts to dissolve. Because fear only thrives when you believe the worst without testing it. So test it. Charge toward what you're avoiding. That conversation, that change, that leap. It will never be as bad as your imagination. And even if it is, you'll survive, you'll adapt, you'll grow. Because courage doesn't mean you feel nothing. It means you act while your hands shake, while your voice trembles. The strongest people you know were once the most afraid. What changed? They stopped listening and started moving. Do that now and you'll realize fear was never the problem, hesitation was. Every time you act despite fear, a new identity forms. One built on truth, not fiction. One that learns to value growth over guarantees. The process is messy, it should be. You're dismantling illusions that have lived inside you for years. Let them fall apart. Let the old mental patterns crack wide open. The mind will resist, it always does when freedom approaches. But you felt it, haven't you? That flicker of who you could be if fear vanished. That version isn't a fantasy, it's waiting behind the wall you refuse to push through. And here's the secret. The wall is paper thin, one step forward and it rips. You don't need more time. You don't need more knowledge. You need more exposure to discomfort, to challenge, to the things that terrify you. Because those things are the key. They're your curriculum. The faster you face them, the faster you evolve. And that's the real reward, not just freedom from fear, but freedom to live without needing permission. The ones who rise are the ones who rehearse bravery, who turn their mornings into battlegrounds, who chase fear instead of avoiding it. They don't ask, will this work? They ask, will this stretch me? Because comfort never creates leaders. Growth does, and growth always travels with fear. So what if, instead of resisting fear, you welcomed it? What if fear was the signal, not the stop sign? That's what the greatest minds in history understood. Fear isn't the enemy, it's the GPS. Follow it far enough, and you'll arrive at the parts of yourself you forgot existed. The fire, the fight, the wild, unfiltered ambition that once made you dream bigger than anyone else dared. It's still there, under the dust, behind the fear, waiting to be unleashed. But no one will hand you the key. You must pry it from the hands of doubt, one action at a time. Start now. Act without the guarantee. Speak without the script. Move before your knees. Stop shaking. Because mastery isn't born in theory. It's earned in chaos. In the moment you get knocked down and decide to get up anyway. In the silence between heartbeats when you choose boldness over withdrawal. This is how the strongest version of you is built, not by removing fear, but by dancing with it, using it, thanking it. Because fear has one job, to make sure you're paying attention, but it's your job to decide what that attention creates. Does it create paralysis or progress? You choose every second, every breath. So breathe like you've already won. Walk like the chains are gone. Talk like fear never existed. Because once you realize it was always smoke, just a shadow on the wall, you'll stop running and start rising. This is the truth no one teaches. Everything you want is guarded by fear, and the only toll is movement. You can't skip this step. You can't outthink the fear. You must outmove it. Even if your voice breaks, even if your plan fails, even if you stumble through the first 100 tries, keep stumbling, keep trying. Because the only real failure is stillness. And that's how most people lose, not by being defeated, but by never starting. So become the exception. Move when others freeze. Speak when others stay silent. Dare when others calculate. And you'll discover a world that only the bold ever see. A world where fear isn't gone, but it no longer matters. Because you've learned to move through it like wind through trees felt, but never final. You are no longer a prisoner. You are the key. Use it. Let your life become a series of bold declarations. Let your days become proof that fear no longer dictates the terms. Not because you erased fear, but because you rewrote the contract. You changed the rules. Now, fear doesn't signal retreat. It signals that something vital is near, that evolution is calling, that the next level is ready. And once you understand this, you stop negotiating with fear. You stop delaying the mission. You walk in. You take the blow. You bleed if you must, but you never stop. Because regret cuts deeper than failure. And hesitation kills dreams faster than defeat ever could. So rise now, not later. Claim the edge. Live in the risk. Tear up the blueprint if you have to. The only way to remove fear completely is to stop feeding it. And that happens every time you act anyway. So act now, and never look back. Let your reflection mirror a person forged in fire, someone who didn't run, someone who didn't flinch. Because when the dust settles, and the world forgets the noise, what remains is this: the memory of your bravery, the legacy of your refusal to break, the quiet power of a life lived all in. This is your moment to join the few, the rare, the ones who didn't just fear less but lived more. Not someday. Now.